Hi, this is Brian Peyton Joyner, and today we're going to make my very famous white bean chicken chili. I was going to do tostadas this week, but I had a request from one of my regular viewers who is going to a chili party on Monday night and asked for some suggestions, so I felt compelled to make this video for her. I have all the ingredients that you're going to need for this white bean chicken chili. Very straightforward. You can pick them up at the store. Have just a roasted whole chicken here. You can find sort of the seasoning packet. This one is sort of chili with white chicken. I have three different white beans, or three different beans. I have these white kidney beans. I have pinto beans, which aren't white, but that's gonna be the only thing not white in the dish. And then I have these white beans. We're gonna have 3 cans of beans, this whole chicken packet. This is 32 ounces of chicken stock and a jar of green salsa. And of course, we're gonna start out with a sweet onion. Now, I first started doing this white bean chicken chili when my mom came to visit one time. She had a recipe that she'd gotten from a friend of hers, and it's something that I'd never heard of. I mean, chili you always think of as being, ground beef with other kinds of beans. So I was very interested in this white bean chicken recipe, and part of it was, I like chicken versus ground beef sometimes, and sometimes that sort of flavors with the tomatoes and everything. You want to try something a little different. So I thought, yeah, why not? So it's critical, of course, to get this chicken like this. And one of the things that I was taught by my mama when I would break down a chicken would be, you want to look at a couple times. And that's the verb that we use in the South when you're going to inspect something. Like if we were going to do beans, like dried beans, you'd always want to look dried beans and make sure that you didn't have rocks or anything like that in there. So you sort of go through the chicken, you do a sort of a basic breakdown of all the meat. Make sure you don't have any bones or any kind of parts that you're not going to have. Some of these kind of things are going to be a little funky if they're in the soup. And then it just depends on how economical you want to be, about getting every last bit of chicken off of there. I have a husband who doesn't like some of the texture of some of the dark meat, so I don't necessarily take all the meat off the bones. I do eventually, but I give it to the dogs. This is something that the dogs really love, is chicken. Of course, I don't give them the bones because chicken bones can splinter, and whereas a dog could eat a raw chicken bone, once it's cooked, the bone will splinter. It won't be very good for the dog. So we're back. One of the things I'm doing is just making sure that I've gone through and kind of shredded this chicken, and I want to make sure that there aren't any bones or any parts that I'm not going to want to go in the dish. If I don't know what it is, in America we don't like bones, and I've been to places like Nigeria, for instance, where the expectation is if you have meat, you're going to just take that. If I had that whole chicken, I would just take that chicken and I would just chop it up, not bothering about what parts or whatever, because in Nigeria, they're very concerned that what they're serving is not the meat it's supposed to be. So if you're going to get chicken in Nigeria, they're going to want to know that it's chicken, and the way they're going to tell that is you're going to have chicken bones in something that's supposed to be chicken. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to dice up my sweet onion. Now I always like to use a sweet onion pretty much in whatever I'm making, unless it calls for red onion versus like a normal brown onion or a yellow onion. The reason for that is I think it just adds that little bit of extra to every dish, and maybe because I grew up in South Carolina right by Georgia, and we were always love the Vidalia onions, which are the best sweet onions, by the way. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And then you're just going to do a dice, and one of the things I like to do is just do them on their side. It doesn't have to be, I tell you, these are going to really cook down ultimately where they're not going to have too much, kind of texture. So once I have about half of that onion, I think that's a good amount of onion. I'm just going to use a little vegetable oil for this. You don't always use olive oil when you're cooking. And I think for something like this, it's probably better just to use just sort of a straight, regular vegetable oil. Nothing can impart too much flavor. I've heard different things on when you add things to oil. I like to add things to oil before the oil has had a chance to heat up, because I find that then I'm able to sort of stir things around and really get a good kind of coating on everything. So I think that's something that is going to be a little bit of a different thing from what a lot of people tell you. And you can see that this is sort of coating these onions, you know, really before they have a chance, you know, kind of to stick to anything. So I'm going to let these onions cook for a good while, because I don't want these onions to be crunchy. If you're going to serve this soup the same day, you're going to want these onions to not be crunchy. If you're going to serve it the next day, which you will, because this makes a lot, it's all right for that to be the case. While I'm doing that, I can go ahead and take care of my beans. Now in this, you don't want any of the liquid from the beans. So you're going to take all of these beans and you're going to drain them. And in fact, it's all right even to rinse them a little bit. Just going to take the white beans. Now you may wonder why I'm using white beans versus just using sort of the regular, like red kidney beans and other things like that. And I think the reason is that white kidney beans have a milder flavor, and I think that that really stands up better to the chicken than the others. Because sometimes like the red kidney beans can have too much flavor and just really overpower the chicken, but the pinto beans are going to be just fine. I'm going to stir this up. If you find things sticking a little bit, you can always go ahead and open your chicken stock and just add, not a lot, because you don't want to kind of boil these. You don't want to steam these too much. You really want to sort of saute these, but nothing wrong with adding a little bit of juice in that regard. Now, I'm going to rinse these beans, and you don't want to rinse them too much. You do just want to rinse them and then just get a lot of that water out of them. This is starting to stick just a little bit. See a little bit of brown bits. So I'm going to toss a little chicken stock in with that. There's like an onion flying out of my pan here. I get a little over aggressive with my excitement here. So these need to cook down for a little bit more. You want them to be soft and not hard. So I'll check back in with you when these are done, and I'll finish making this great dish. Thanks. All right, we're back, and my onions have softened. The next thing I want to do is I want to add my chicken. I'm going to just stir that a little bit with some of the chicken stock. Put maybe about a cup or so of the chicken stock over probably like a medium-high heat. And then I'm going to go ahead and add some of my salsa, about half of a jar, and this is a 16-ounce jar of salsa. And I'm just going to stir this up. And like I said, you can do this over a little bit higher heat, because I'm going to want this to all get nice and warm. And once I have this stirred up really well, what I'm going to do next is add in the flavoring packet. Now this flavoring packet has some flour in it and things like that. So you're going to want to make sure that you add some liquid, you know, when you add this flavoring packet right afterwards, to the extent that it sort of dries up things. So you see that's already starting to absorb a lot of that liquid. So I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of this cooking stock here. And this is just sort of a basic, you know, chicken stock that you get in. Already you can tell, my God, that looks amazing. You see these herbs and the spices and everything, and the little bit of flour that's in that is going to really thicken it nicely. I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of my chicken stock to that. Get that nice and stirred in. I'm going to add the rest of this salsa. And you see I have this on a pretty high heat, so it's going to come to temperature fairly quickly. Now, normally this time of year I wouldn't be worried about making soups, because I live in Palm Springs. And we typically have pretty gorgeous weather this time of year in February. But this is an El Nino year and we've had a lot of rain. So if you're living in California, it's like all of a sudden the drought that we had forever was over. This is going to be something that you're going to want to make for your friends, family. You can do it for the Super Bowl, which is coming up in a couple weeks. I tell you, and already the smell of that is just absolutely fantastic. You get the chili powder, the cumin, you get it just already starts to smell like a delicious stew. And I can also smell like the tomatillos that are in that green salsa. That's where it takes place of like the red tomatoes, you know, that you would have in a regular chili. Once I have these flavors melded and I have all of this stirred in, it's much easier to stir that sort of powdery in. I'm gonna add the beans now. And so I want to make sure I'm not dripping those. I'm just gonna add the beans, and you just dump them all in. Don't have to be delicate about that. And then I'm just gonna stir that in. I wanna get everything up to a boil, everything mixed up. And then the secret to a soup is patience and time. Once I get this to a boil, I'm just going to turn it down on low, and I'm just gonna let it cook for probably 45 minutes to an hour. And I'll come and check it every now and then and make sure that it's not sticking to the bottom. But I'm gonna put it on a fairly low temperature where it is way less than a boil, because everything in here is cooked, so I don't need to get anything up to temperature where it will cook. I just wanna get it at that temperature and let it kind of slow cook for a while so that all those delicious flavors meld together. Now you may be thinking, well, what are we gonna have with this? You know, are you making cornbread? Being from the South, we would normally serve this with cornbread. But since it's the new year, I've been eating a little bit lighter. And I found that when I had this with cornmeal, that was one thing that really, really was heavy about the dish. So instead, we're gonna have this with some tortilla chips. And we'll just have a few tortilla chips. And that'll still be delicious, but not leave you with that super heavy feeling. Okay, you can see that this is boiling. You see all that smoke coming up, the steam. I'm gonna do one last little taste test. Make sure that the salt levels are right, which should be. The salt levels and everything are right. It's not gonna taste like the final product when you taste it here because all those flavors haven't melded. So you're probably gonna get a little sharpness of maybe pepper. You'll get a little sharpness from the tomato, from the tomatillos. And it's not gonna taste like it will after it's been cooking for about 45 minutes. So all you're really wanting to do at this point in the taste testing is just to make sure that your salt level is right and that everything kind of there. And if you wanted to add a little more heat, you could add a little cayenne pepper if you wanted to. But the sauce I got is spot on, and this has the right amount of heat. It has the right amount of acidity. It has the right amount of just overall yummy flavor goodness. So I'm gonna put the lid on that and I'm gonna let that cook for a while. I'm gonna check it about every 5 minutes or so to do a stir, and I will get back to y'all when this is done and we'll try a bowl. Thanks. Hi, this is Brian Payton Joyner, and we're back. My soup has been cooking for an hour or so. And initially, when I tasted and smelled it, you got really sharp notes of the chili powder or the tomatillo. But now all of the spices have kind of melded and has this very amazing just really rich, earthy, hearty flavor that comes from how the chicken has really gotten a little more stringy. It's so amazing. Now, how I'm gonna serve this, so I'm gonna serve it in these little bowls. About 2 ladles will be enough, because I tell you, this really is a lot. I have some really delightful, these super sort of restaurant style chips, which are very hearty and crunchy. I'm gonna put a dollop of sour cream, and then sprinkle some cheddar cheese on it. And then I'll have a little taste of it, sort of fully with everything. Get some of those beans, the chicken. You can see the cheese is melting there. because it's so good. Actually, the flavor profile of this is something that is like a hug from your mama. It is so comforting. You have that chicken flavor, but then you've got the spiciness, you've got those notes of acid from the tomatillo. This is something that no matter how cold it is outside, this is gonna warm you up. This is Brian Payne Joyner with my white bean chicken chili. I hope y'all make this and enjoy it and have a great day.